Hello guys, and welcome to the next installment of how I personally make my pedals. And in the last video we got to a point where we tested the circuit and found that everything worked well. So the next step is preparing the enclosure. So you need an enclosure, obviously, and this one is a 1590, it's equivalent to a Hammond 1590 BB. That size. You could probably fit this circuit in a 1590A, but I wouldn't recommend that if you're just starting out, or if you're like me and you mess up lots. But it'll fit comfortably in a 1590 BB. Now if you were to build a circuit like this and it was like a kit, you would probably get it with an enclosure this size, or maybe even a 1590A. But most kits come with a drilling template, which you would print on a piece of paper and then attach to the enclosure, so you would know exactly where to drill for everything. Obviously, this not being a kit, I can't do that. So let's go over the parts that I use to design and drill out my enclosure. A ruler, a pencil, a punch, and a hand drill, power drill, whatever you want to call it. Also, to make the drilling process easier, I've got a set of step bits. And you can find these at pretty much any hardware store. They're not too expensive. And if you get into making pedals, you'll be using them a lot. So you'll get your money's worth. So before we get started, you're also going to need to take into account any extra pieces that you need to complete the pedal. So I'm talking about things like foot switches, mounting hardware for your LEDs. You can use these little metal ones. I usually use these black plastic ones. But either way, you need to take into account of what size you need to drill for whichever piece of hardware you have. DC power jacks, and of course input and output jacks. I use mono for all mine, but because I don't put batteries in my pedals, because I use a power supply for everything. If you want to put batteries in your pedals, you'll need a mono and a stereo, just for proper switching. So now that you have all that, all you really need to do is sort of get a sense of where you want everything to go inside the enclosure so that everything fits and looks decent on the outside, or at least to you. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, really. So let me switch the camera around and hopefully I'll get you a better view of my process here. Alright, now unfortunately I don't really have a very good camera rig here, so hopefully you can see everything I'm doing. So the first thing that I do when I'm planning out where I'm going to drill everything is I find the center line of the enclosure. So it's about 58 mils across. Cut that in half, and that's what, 29 mils. So on these pedals where there's only one knob in the switch, I find it's helpful to have center line. I mean, I find center line anyway, just to try to be somewhat symmetrical in how I mount everything. But it's especially easy with one knob design, because the switch can go at the bottom and the knob can go at the top. So, having said that, you just need to find out how far you want your switch up from the bottom of the pedal, really, and how far down you want the knob from the top. It's not really rocket science. So a lot of people, when they design pedals like this, they would put the switch somewhere around here so that they have space below for a 9-volt battery. But as I said, I don't use 9-volt batteries in my builds, so I tend to mount my switches farther down, right about there. And in doing a fair amount of them, I've determined that My favorite spot for the switch is about 15 mils up from the bottom, and that's 15 mils to the center of the switch. So I'll make a mark there. So that'll be where the center of the switch is going to be mounted, and that's where we'll make a punch for the drill. Now, as far as where I mount the knobs, it's usually fairly similar, although I don't tend to go too close to the top, because then if you use a larger knob like a chicken head or something, it'll overhang the edge of the pedal. So with knobs, I tend to mount them down a bit farther, maybe 20 to 25 mils. That way, if you use a larger knob, you'll have plenty of room on the face of the pedal. So I think for this one, I'll go down around, let's go down 25 mils. That seems like a good number here. So we've got our mark for the knob, or the potentiometer, mark for the switch, and really when I'm making pedals, the face of the pedal I tend to draw everything out with a pencil and make sure that I have everything exactly where I want it. When it comes to the jacks on the side, or the jacks in general, the DC jack and everything, I just kind of wing those. I'm not very precise with those. So, I mean, you can do the same thing with the sides and the, well, wherever you want to mount the jacks, sides or the top, wherever you want to mount the DC jack, you can measure everything out. But like I said, I tend to wing that. So I'll just do some quick little estimates in my head, and I'll make some marks for those, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I've just made a couple of preliminary marks for the input and output jacks. I haven't made a mark yet for the DC jack, because sometimes it's best to drill a couple of the ones that you're sure of first, and then just dry mount the parts in there to you'll get a better estimate of where everything's going to fit once everything's drilled. So I'm going to drill these, and then I will decide where I want to put the DC jack after that and drill for that. Now, when it comes to drilling, for me, it's a fairly simple process. I forgot to mention, with having a punch, you're also going to need to have a hammer or something heavy to hit the punch. So what we need to do is punch the center of the marks we made for the potentiometer and the switch, and any other marks you have ironed out. We'll just punch the center of those. Now, you don't need to do this really hard. As you can see, there's just a little indentation there, and that'll be enough to keep the drill from wandering, and that's all you want. So you don't have to like come onto it really hard and try to punch the punch physically through the enclosure. You just want a little mark to keep the drill steady. Now, I will offer a disclaimer at this point. I drill with a hand drill. I don't use a drill press, because that just seems like too much expense for a hobby for me. Obviously, this is better with a drill press. It's much easier and probably safer and cleaner, so keep that in mind. The way I'm doing it may not be particularly safe for your particular needs. So I don't take any responsibility if you follow what I say and get yourself hurt. Just keep that in mind. So basically, when I drill these, I leave them on a flat surface. I usually put them on the floor, to be honest, because it makes a lot of mess and it's easier to vacuum. So I put it on a hard surface, and I just drill 1 or 2 steps in just to start, and then I use a finer step drill bit to get the exact dimensions that I need, with the exception of the the foot switch and the DC jack are both, I believe, 1/2 inch holes, which on one of the drill bits is all the way to the bottom. So I drill those out without needing the finer drill bit. Anyway, let me drill these and I'll come right back. Okay, so as you can see, I've just got everything loosely mounted in there just to see how much space I've got to work with here. Now, personally, I like to mount the LEDs on the side of the foot switch. Sometimes I do it up the center somewhere if I feel like I have enough room. This is all personal preference, so you can put yours wherever you want. In a build like this, I tend to put it on the side. It just keeps it closer to the foot switch and makes the wiring a little bit easier for me. But for me. But in this build, putting it in the center, maybe right about there, that will probably be fine as well. In fact, I think that's where I'm going to put it this time. But looking at this, I'm probably going to have to mount the power jack on the side. You know what, I could probably mount that on the top. And again, this is all personal preference, so don't worry about where you put yours. If you just put it somewhere because that's the only place it'll fit, that's fine. But with power jacks like these, I have an option. There is this type, which is mounted internally, which I think looks a lot cleaner. Unfortunately, it takes up a lot more space on the inside. Conversely, they're also available like this, which mounts externally, which, in my opinion, doesn't really look very good, but as you can see, saves you quite a bit of space on the inside of the pedal. So if you find you're having trouble with a jack like this, you can replace it with a jack like this. And in this case, the holes, like the mounting holes that you need to drill, are the exact same size. So I'm going to try mounting this on the top, and if this one is a little too long on the inside, I'll just put this one on it instead, and that'll solve my problem. So I'm going to go drill those other two holes for the LED mount and the power jack, and I'll be right back. Okay, so with all the holes drilled where you want them, what I tend to do next is I will sand the surface just of the face of the pedal, because it'll get rid of the pencil lines and it'll create kind of a cool looking finish. If you're going to paint your pedal or anything like that, you probably don't need to do that. You can just prime over it and then paint or something, or I mean, I don't powder coat my pedals, so I have no idea how you would go about doing that. I'm really not a very good pedal finisher, so I'm not going to make a video on that. What I will do is I will link in the description of this video. There's a video that I followed, which it gives you good tips on how to design a label, and I think he also gives you tips on how to finish it. The way I tend to finish pedals is I will either use a spray can primer, like auto paints basically. I spray primer on it, spray a coat of paint on it, and then I'll put a label on it that I designed, spray a coat of clear on it. That's generally my process, but I'm getting way ahead of myself. Let me just sand the surface and I'll show you what that looks like. So this is what it looks like after sanding, and I think that looks really cool, especially if you just put a label over it and then a coat of clear. It looks pretty fantastic, and it's a lot easier than messing around with too much paint. So, with the pedal drilled in, or the enclosure drilled and prepared, we can start mounting our parts. So I think I will cut it off there for this video. the last video will basically just be the off-board wiring and making sure that everything there is good. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're getting something out of it, or at least the few of you that requested it. I hope you're enjoying this so far. And we're just about done, so I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.